Hello everyone, welcome back to Age of Nagash, which is a channel dedicated to Age of Sigmar. In today's video, we're going to be looking at the allegiance abilities for the Nighthaunt. Right, so this section describes the allegiance abilities available to the Nighthaunt army, including battle traits for the army, command traits for its general, and magical artifacts available to its heroes. Right, so we're going to start with battle traits. The first one, Deathless Spirits. The spirit form of Nighthaunt warriors are made more formidable by the presence of their lords and masters. Roll a dice for each wound or mortal wound inflicted on a friendly Nighthaunt unit within 6 inches of your general or another Nighthaunt hero from your army. On a roll of a 6, the wound is negated and has no effect. Right, so this is essentially the death save, which we first saw in the first General's Handbook, which essentially gives death units within 6 inches of your hero a 6-up save against wounds and mortal wounds. The difference is if you take just a Nighthaunt army, it's only going to benefit your Nighthaunt units. And I say this because you can take allies in your army of different fractions within death, or you can summon units in, of course, like we've talked about before. So just bear in mind, this is only going to help out your Nighthaunt units, not all the death units in your army, as they all need the Nighthaunt keyword for this to be in effect. Right, their next ability, Ethereal Rulers. Khan Wraiths and Tomb Banshees are the rulers of the Nighthaunt realms, and are capable of calling their spirit brethren to the battlefield. Instead of setting up a Nighthaunt unit on the battlefield, you can place it to one side and say it is set up in the underworld. If you do so, you can roll on the table below for the unit at the start of any of your movement phases, as long as there is at least one friendly Khan Wraith or Tomb Banshee somewhere on the battlefield. Okay, so the table. So, roll a d6. On a 1 and 2, it's a failure, so the unit remains in the underworld. You can roll for it again in future movement phases, if allowed to do so. Okay, and then if you get a 3 to 6, it's called forth. You can set up the unit anywhere on the battlefield that is more than 9 inches from any enemy units. This counts as the unit's move for this movement phase. So, it's a way for you to be able to teleport units in. It is sort of comparable to summoning. I actually prefer this way because you can set up anywhere on the battlefield, not within 18 inches of your Death Wizard who did the summoning spell. Yep, you can fail it though. That can be a problem when you really need to summon in this unit right now, and there is obviously a third of a chance of you failing it, and if you keep on failing it before the end of the battle, those models will be counted as slain, so that's not very good for competitive play, especially when you're in a tournament and you'll just be giving kill points away to your opponent. But like I say, there is only 1 in 3 chance of that happening, so I like it. I think it's definitely worth doing, especially how you don't have to roll for it in every movement phase. Unlike a Stormcast, they have a very similar ability, but you have to roll in each of your movement phases. So you could have 2 units set up, and this is Stormcast. You could have 1 unit you want to come down, Unit 1, and then Unit 2 you don't want it to come down. So you roll for Unit 1, it doesn't make it, gets a 1 or 2, and then you roll for Unit 2, which you don't want to come down, and it makes it, so you have to set it up on the battlefield. Whereas the Nighthaunt here can pick and choose which units they want to roll for on the table. So yeah, it's a nice ability. It is a nice way to teleport guys in, even if you do not plan on using it so much. Still use it a bit, because your opponent will be put off by this, because even if you can't summon in that much because you haven't deployed much in the underworld, your opponent will still be worried about moving too far forward, because if they do, you're going to pop up units right in his backfield to take his objective, and a lot of the time in these battle plans, their objective, your enemy's one, is worth a lot more to you. So you have to make the enemy really think about the situation that's been put in front of him unwantingly, and if he's too busy thinking about that, He's not thinking about other things, so he's more than likely going to make mistakes for you to take advantage of. So that is Ethereal Rulers. I think that's a very nice ability. It makes them quite different as well to a lot of the other death abilities out there. Okay, the next one. Now this is the adaptation to the Black Coach's War Scroll in a Nighthaunt army. I talked about this in my Nighthaunt video, but I'll go over it again. So, Conduits of Ethereal Power. Black Coaches in a Nighthaunt army can draw power from nearby Calm Wraiths and Tomb Banshees. When a Black Coach is in a Nighthaunt army, uses Invocation of Death ability, roll 1 dice for each Calm Wraith or Tomb Banshee within 12 inches of the Black Coach instead of each Death Wizard. So I talked about this a lot in the Nighthaunt video. I gave my opinions quite strongly on that, how I feel about the Black Coach, but it's nice for them to make this adaptation because it makes it a lot more useful in a Nighthaunt army now. You know, it's viable, shall we say. Okay, and then that's all the battle traits, so we'll now look at the command traits. So, the first one is Hatred of the Living. You can reroll hit rolls of 1 for attacks made by the general unless the target has the death or demon keyword. I'm not a huge fan of this one because in your Nighthaunt army, your heroes aren't going to be huge combat hitters. So being able to reroll hit rolls of 1 for them isn't really that good. And then, furthermore, this ability does not come into effect if you're targeting something with the death or demon keyword. So death obviously is huge, that's the Grand Alliance, and then demon is obviously the Chaos Demons, but also Seraphon have the demon keyword, so that's something to bear in mind. So just because of the fact that you don't really have any big combat heroes in this army, I mean, they do well for how many points they cost, because, you know, they're 4 wound models, so you don't want to get them in combat too much anyway. Right, okay, the second one, Terrifying Entity. Subtract 1 from the bravery of enemy units within 6 inches of the general. Okay, so this is good. This is comparing very nicely with the Tomb Banshee Scream, because as I described in the Nighthaunt video, for more information, have a look at it. So the Tomb Banshee has a shooting attack. You pick an enemy unit within 10 inches of her. You roll 2 dice, and the difference between your result and the enemy's bravery, if you beat it, is how many mortal wounds they take. So being able to subtract 1 from their bravery helps you to deal more mortal wounds to that unit, so it synergizes nicely there, so that's quite a nice ability. Okay, number 3, Lingering Spirits. Add 1 to the general's wound characteristics. Okay, so again this is a nicer one because now your general no longer has 4 wounds, now he's got 5 wounds, which is nice. And then also if you take the Black Coach instead, it has 8 wounds instead of 7, but that's up to you. So yeah, makes your guys a little bit more tougher. And then number 4, Pitiless Executioner. Add 1 to the damage caused by an attack made by the general if the hit roll was a 6 or more. Yeah, again, I mean, it's not bad. I mean, if you give this to the Calm Wraith, there's a chance he'll be doing 3 damage per attack. A small chance, but a chance nonetheless. But like I said earlier, you don't have heavy combat hitters or heroes in Nighthaunt, so trying to make them good at something they're not particularly, it just feels like it's wasted energy, which rather put on something else. It's nice, as said, could make the Calm Wraith a damage dealer, but I don't think so, and particularly how you have to get a hit roll of a 6 or more, and then you have to wound as well, and then the enemy obviously gets a chance to save against it, and it's just too ifs and buts for me. Right, number 5, Cloaked in Shadow. Add 1 to the general save roll. Now that's nice. That's a nice ability. It doesn't rely on you getting 6s to hit, and for you to not have to target death or demon keywords. And it's not about a combat ability. It's just making your guy more survivable. Now he's got a 3-up save and not taking any rend. So yes, I do see the uses there. I would probably prefer that more than the add 1 to the General's wound characteristic from the Lingering Spirit command trait. But they both have their different uses. The add 1 to General save is nice though. Now number 6, the last but certainly not the least. Ruler of the Spirit Hosts. As long as your General is alive, you can re-roll dice when attempting to call a unit from the underworld to the battlefield. See the Ethereal Ruler's battle trait, which we've just looked at. Okay, I think by far this one is the best because it adds the most to the army, and like we were talking about with the Ethereal Rulers, it's good, but there is a chance you could fail to bring that crucial unit into the game. However, with this you can re-roll it, so it was only a third of the chance you were going to fail anyway. So with the re-roll, it incredibly enhances your chances. So I think this one's definitely the best. Sure, your General could get sniped off because it says only if he's alive, but for any of these command traits to work, your General has to be alive anyway. So Rulers of the Spirit Hosts is definitely the best, as I think it adds the most to the army. Right, with all the command traits done, let's have a look at the Nighthaunt artifacts. So number 1, Cloak of the Waxing Moon. Each blade that passes through the wispy folds of this dark garnet begins to lose its substance as it too becomes ethereal. Your opponent must subtract 1 from wound rolls made for enemy melee weapons that target this unit. Yes, so this is good, especially paired up with a few other things, because of course your heroes will have a 4-up save anyway, not taking rend, and with a couple other things paired in there, like if you chuck a Mystic Shield on them, now they've got a 3-up save, not taking any rend, or if they're in cover, they'll get the +1, so a 3-up save, and with how small these heroes are, it's quite easy to make sure they're in cover. And if you have a Mongol as well, that's now made you have a -1 to hit rolls for the enemy if they're within 6 inches of the Mongol. And if you put this hero with his command trait within 6 inches of the Mongol as well, they're -1 to hit and wound. And of course it depends on what you're fighting and how incredibly buffed up the enemy unit is, but this will make the amount of attacks the enemy can do a lot less effective, as you will have to roll less save rolls, particularly with only a 4 wound model. So start off with the Cloak of the Waxing Moon. Looks pretty good. Okay, number 2, Pendant of the Fell Wind. A chill gale blows ever behind the wearer of this dark trinket, carrying them into battle on gusts of suffocating air. Add 3 to the move characteristic of any friendly Nighthaunt units within 6 inches of this model at the start of the movement phase. Right, okay, so this is really good. Already, I think this might be the best one, to be honest, because your Nighthaunt units are relatively fast, especially for a Death Army. Some of the units are very fast, like your one of your battle line choices being the Hex Race, which moves 12 inches normally. So now you can add 3 inches to it if they're within 6 inches of this Nighthaunt hero. So now they're moving 15 inches, which is huge. Bear in mind they can fly, and if they fly over enemy units they can cause mortal wounds. And the even if things like Spirit Hosts, who have a 6-inch movement, now they've got a 9-inch movement, and of course they can fly, so it just makes them be able to move that bit further, which is really nice. And things like the Mongol, which has, if I can remember correctly, a 12-inch move, so now it's made into a 15-inch move, and that's so good, especially if you want to get this model, being the Mongol, into the midst of the enemy, just to make that -1 to hit so more effective. So add 3 to the move characteristic of friendly Nighthaunt units within 6 inches of this model at the start of the movement phase. It's really good, I think. Potentially the best one. We'll read the rest through, but the Pendant of the Fell Wind, for me, is the best one at the moment. So number 3, the Dreadbolt Ring. With each soul that this ring devours, the gouts of lashing green flames grow more ravenous. If this model inflicts 1 or more wounds with its attacks in the combat phase, you can inflict a mortal wound on 1 enemy unit within 3 inches of this model after this model completes its other attacks in the phase. Okay, so I mean, obviously a chance to do Mortal Wounds is good, and with some of your heroes in Nighthaunt, you have got depending on what you're up against, you've got a good chance of inflicting one or more wounds. But again, your heroes in Nighthaunt aren't combat heroes necessarily. They can't compete with other factions, big models like, even within Death, like Vampire Lord, or if you go to Destruction, you've got a Mega Boss. These can't compete with that. So it's in another army it'd be good. It's not bad. It's just I don't think you should focus your heroes being combat orientated, because their attacks are more of they can handle themselves in combat. You don't want to be just chucking them into combat because you think they can do so much damage, because they can't. I mean, the Calm Wraith can do a lot of damage for how many points he costs, so there's nothing wrong by charging him in onto an edge of an enemy unit so he can do all of his attacks, and the enemy would struggle to be able to do many attacks against him. And things like that, they are good in combat, but they're not like one-man armies. They can't, like, one of these heroes can't take out an enemy unit ever so easily. So, number 4, Light Shard of the Harvest Moon. Once released, this baleful light fills the battlefield with an eerie glow, readying the enemy for the reaping. You can use this artifact once per battle in your combat phase. When you do so, you can reroll failed hit rolls for friendly Nighthaunt units within 6 inches of this model when they attack in that combat phase. So this is good. I would say it's the second best one so far. I'm still preferring the add 3 to your move for the Pendant of the Fell Wind. And I only say that because the Pendant of the Fell Wind is a constant every single movement phase for each Nighthaunt unit within 6 inches of the bearer of this artifact. Whereas the Light Shard of the Harvest Moon might sound more exciting because rerolling failed hit rolls is fun, and also it's all about damage, and damage is more exciting than movement. But it's still as good. You can have your Spirit Host, for example, make the best of this ability, because yes, they do the mortal wounding on the 6, so that's why it's quite nice to re-roll failed hit rolls. But they hit on 5 normally, so they'll be re-rolling a lot of dice, generating a lot more 6s than you would think. Also for the Mongol, he has his ability where if he gets a 6 to hit, it does 3 damage that attack rather than 2 damage. So there are quite a few units in the Nighthaunt army that would make the most of this ability, and it is nice. I'm just a big fan of movement because I think that's one of the biggest tactics of Age of Sigmar. But if you're to use the Light Shard of the Harvest Moon to most effect, try and keep your army together as a whole, dependent of course on what objectives you need to go for. But when it's all in combat, make sure this bearer is not necessarily in combat themselves, but just behind your line, so he can let off this artifact and give its ability off to as many Nighthaunt units as you can. So yeah, that's good. I'd say that's the second best one so far, but of course it is just my opinion, so you might prefer the re-rolling of hits, because to do more damage, it does have its purposes, especially if you had loads of Spirit Hosts, like maxed out unit sizes and everything. This could be beautiful. Okay, number 5, Midnight Tome. Only the lifeless can read the spells and incantations inscribed upon the pitch black pages of this cursed grimoire. The bearer of the Midnight Tome becomes a wizard and knows arcane bolt and mystic shield spells. They can attempt to cast one spell in their own hero phase and attempt to unbind one spell in each enemy hero phase. Okay, now this is good. It is good. I'm just thinking if it's as good as the Pendant of the Fell Wind, and I'm going to say it's not, but I'm going to say it is potentially better than the Light Shard of the Harvest Moon, because not being able to have a wizard normally in the Nighthaunt army being able to turn one of your Calm Rays or your Tomb Banshees into a wizard just so you can do the Mystic Shield spell like I've mentioned a few times, so you can make your units now have a free up non-rendable save, is really nice. And especially having an Arcane Bolt can be very handy to snipe out enemy heroes, as shooting in Death Armies is very rare. Yes, the Tomb Banshee has it, but it's only 10-inch range, and being able to shoot heroes tend to have high bravery as well, so it doesn't really go off. So being able to do Mystic Shield and Arcane Bolt is very useful. Right, number 6, Covetous Familiar. This spiteful poltergeist swirls around its master's essence, lashing out at any other soul that draws too close. Roll a dice for each enemy unit within 3 inches of this model at the start of a combat phase. On a roll of a 4 or more, that unit suffers 1 mortal wound. So yeah, it's alright as a self-defense method. On a 4 or more, doing a mortal wound to each enemy unit within 3 inches. So 4 or more, it's not hard to do, it's a 50-50, and if the enemy's got potentially 2 or 3 units within 3 inches of you, you've got a good chance of doing a couple mortal wounds. It's when you compare it to the other artifacts out there, like the Midnight Tome that would turn the bearer into a wizard, the Light Shard of the Harvest Moon, which was the once per game Nighthaunt units within 6 inches of this model, being able to re-roll those failed hit rolls in that combat phase. And then my personal favourite was the Pendant of the Fell Wind, which was the add 3 to the movement characteristic of any friendly Nighthaunt unit within 6 inches of this model at the start of any movement phase. Compared to those, it doesn't really impress too much, and particularly how there are no battalions in the Nighthaunt army, which being a Death army, I mean, you'll be shocked of the surprise to hear about that. So you'll only be able to have 1 artifact for the army, and as it is not as good as the 3 ones I've just mentioned, you wouldn't take it because you can't take more than 1 artifact for the Nighthaunt. And as that is the end of the allegiance abilities, let's summarise what we've looked at. So the battle traits. So you've got the 6 up against mortal wounds and wounds for Nighthaunt units if they're within 6 inches of one of your Nighthaunt heroes, which is good. You know, it's always a constant. If you play this right, you'll be saving 1/6 of all damage caused to you that game. The ethereal rulers, so being able to set up a Nighthaunt unit in the underworld instead of deploying it, so you can teleport in later. It's good, especially how they have access to the Mongol, which I talked about, that horrendous creature in the Nighthaunt video. So if you want to check out its rules, go have a look at that. And as I talked about it in there, to summon it normally is a casting value of 10, which is not very easy to do, shall we say. So being able to call it forth from the underworld on a result of a 3 or more is a lot better. Of course, you need to have this model in your army list to start with, but regardless, if you've got one with you to the game, you're probably going to end up using it. And then the Conjurates of the Ethereal Power. So this is, of course, the Black Coach tweak they did to it, so it fits in more with a Nighthaunt army. It makes the Black Coach, don't really know what to say. It makes the Black Coach more of an option to take in your Nighthaunt army, let's put it like that. Okay, and then the command traits. So, out of all the ones we went through, my favourite was the Ruler of the Spirit Host. So as long as the General is alive, you can re-roll the dice when attempting to call a unit from the underworld to the battlefield. So, like I was saying, trying to bring like a Mongol on, usually it's really hard. With the Ethereal Rulers, you do it on a 3-up. But with this command trait as well, as long as the General's alive, you get to re-roll that dice. So you're almost guaranteed to get that Mongol onto the battlefield that turn for when you really need it. Or any of the Nighthaunt units, another hero, more Spirit Hosts, maybe more Hex Race for the numbers. So that's good. And then the Nighthaunt artifacts, I'm going to go for the Pendant of the Fell Wind. I mean, the other 2 good contenders are the Light Shard of the Harvest Moon to re-roll the failed hit rolls, and the Midnight Tome to make your bearer a wizard. But for me, the Pendant of the Fell Wind, because I've gone to enough tournaments before to realise how important movement is, and if you can make your Hex Rays move 15 inches, It's so good. I mean, a use I could see for the Black Coach here is give that the artifact, because it's got 7 wounds. It's a bit more beefier, and because it moves 10 inches anyway, it can keep up with the Hex Race to keep on giving it the extra movement. So I found a use for the Black Coach, so if anything, that was worth doing the video. And then that is my suggestions. Now, when I look at allegiance abilities for an army, it's easy to go and look at the command traits that make you do an extra damage on your weapon, or give you an extra attack or an extra rend, or the artifacts that boost your combat effectiveness somehow. But for me, I always look at the command traits and artifacts that don't just help the bearer, but help your army. So when you're looking at these Nighthaunt artifacts, I immediately pick out the ones that have the bold Nighthaunt name in the description, because I know that's going to help out my Nighthaunt army as opposed to just helping out this one single model. And honestly, if you can work like that and just look at how can I help the effectiveness of the army, not just try and make one model into a Death Star, because that rarely works. And even if it does, yeah, that might be horrendous, but the rest of your army is going to struggle. That was the Nighthaunt allegiance abilities. So some good ones there. Definitely helps out the army and makes it a bit more playable because of the lack of units compared to the size of other armies, mainly in Order and Chaos. But it's got allegiance ability, so there's a lot more flavour there, a lot more content for you to be able to play around with and to experience the army with. And yeah, was a good read, and I hope you found this video helpful and enjoyable. If so, please like and subscribe, as it really helps me produce more videos. So in the next video, we're going to be having a look at a slightly larger fraction in the Death Grand Alliance, that of course being the Soulblight. Now, for those of you that don't know, Soulblight are the vampires in Age of Sigmar. So in the next video, I'll be looking at their lore and their individual units. So until then, remember, Nagash is all, and all is one in Nagash.